As head of AXA Foresight, I am working on the future, what will be the world in 5-10 years. And we've just finished a study on the future of artificial intelligence. In order to avoid collision between two airplanes, people thought of using artificial intelligence, so to using bots that can calculate and anticipate crashes. But before, this was only made by humans. You know, humans sitting and giving orders to the plane, go up, go down. Then is the question, how do you make this transition? How do you provide those people sitting in the planes and the air controller with the device? And at first there were big accidents because the order from the machine that the pilots were receiving is, you're gonna crash, go up. But the order of the human, the air traffic controller, was the opposite, go down. And what they did, they trust the human because they trust what they knew and they trust the way they were interacting before. And so they blocked the automation, and then there were these incidents. So the question, which I really like, is how do you anticipate to let go? And second, how do you anticipate this transition phase? And I would like to say it's going to be crucial for AXA because we're going to insure driverless cars. You know, those cars that will be like Google cars or Tesla cars. And so we will need to make sure we anticipate the change in the risk profile, because today we really know quite well the profile of risk of the drivers. We know about human failures. We know about people feeling sleepy when they drive. We will have to learn about automated failure, bugs maybe, or hacking. So this is really something which will be fascinating, and we will need to adapt the insurance framework to these new patterns. And the challenge is how to ensure innovation. Because in order to assess a risk, normally you learn from the past. So how can you insure a technology where you have no past to learn from? You have no data set. You don't know exactly what it can be. So this is a very good example of the contact between a human and a machine in face of a risk. Then there is a second one, which I really would like to mention as well, is robo-advice. So before, people wanted to know what to do with their money, where to invest it. Today, there are an emergence of large numbers of bots, so algorithms, which can understand your risk profile, understand your projects, and give you the same kind of recommendation. But then it's great, because this is not so costly. So even you and I could use a bot and maybe have some advice we will never have had before. But then there is also a lot of questions, because what if the bot, for instance, doesn't reflect accurately my needs or my risk level? How can I understand? How can I trust the bot? And this is really important because algorithms are going to surround us in the future. We are only at the beginning of this robo-advice, but it's going to be huge. It's already quite powerful in the US. Many of the US citizens, they're used to do that. Actually, they feel even more comfortable because they think a human might get a fee. You know, he might be paid to sell this financial product. So maybe the human is not so trustworthy because he wants to go on holidays, he wants this money. So they have started to think a robot could be better. Will it be the same for Europe? We don't know, because it's a question of culture and acceptance and our relation to technology.
So how do you envision, as a foresight leader of this organization, the future of insurance industry and how neuroergonomics will play into your game?
So we really think at AXA that trust is going to be the key word of the future. So we are thinking on how can we enhance trust in our way we do business and the way we'll deal with data. So we are working right now on how do you ensure artificial intelligence. Yes. I give you a very concrete example. I'm a human and I'm getting augmented with an exoskeleton so that I can carry very heavy things, okay? Mm-hmm. For us, it's very challenging because for an insurance company, we either ensure health of the people that we know, or we ensure a device, something which is external to the people. How do you ensure an exoskeleton? Because the exoskeleton, if it's maybe going wrong, can create health issue. But if I have a health issue, maybe then the arms will not work, the automatic arms will not work properly. So it means we have to completely rethink the way we are organized, and this is the first time that we have to really reshuffle and transform. Not only at the highest level, the executive, but till the people, till the agent, talking to his customer and transforming the interaction.
Yesterday and a few days before, as we started interacting with your colleagues, my thinking completely changed. So it seems you belong with aerospace and defense and agriculture and all of these industries already, but now you will be driving them actually to think for the future in a much more productive and sustainable way.
We really think that we can guarantee innovation. Because unless we ensure, for instance, driverless car, they will not be in the street. Yes. Because, to get the authorization, they will need this insurance. So we have a very specific role to play in anticipation and innovation.
Now I will move to another thought leader from AXA. Our communication almost to this moment has been electronically. Obviously, it belongs with him because he's the CEO of AXA Tech. He's in charge and he manages the entire IT infrastructure at the group level.
If you see applications that have been designed 20 years ago, the user interface is miserable. Right? It has been designed by engineers. I'm an engineer, so I know what I'm talking about. So now there is a pressure to change all of this. Now, on top of that, imagine that we have been investing in innovation for the last forever years. And every innovation generates a legacy somewhere with the effect of having layers of legacy one on top of the other. So the big challenge here is the pressure from that for the change in what you are providing in terms of usability, is the pressure in changing the minds and the heads of our people in adopting new behaviors and new principles and approaches. And it's a pure people challenge, plus the challenge of complexity. And not the complexity of the individual system. If I take, a router or a firewall, it's complex in itself, but it's an encapsulated complexity. The real complexity we face is the integration and multiplication of all those components on geographically spread, because it's on a global scale, different teams, different implementations, different clients, and all of this is a more of a combinatorial complexity than the individual one. And this complexity leads to effects where a very small glitch, not even a mistake, but a glitch or a bug in a corner can accumulate with a whole set of different bugs and become a major issue. There is also an element which is very human, which is the question of taking risk. Because we have this mythology that there is the new tool that solves my problem. If you look back, there is a sort of technology Darwinism. There has been plenty of new technologies, and 90% of them has disappeared. You remember the VHS home movie and the Betacam discussion, some of you probably, right? So some technologies disappear. Now, what does it mean for technology adoption? Am I going to buy technology A or B, or do I just have to wait until it's clear which one is going to win? And that's very, very human. There is also one element which is the one of, and we had a conversation about, is it better to have a big bang, transform everything, put a zillion on the table and do it, or try to evolve to a better state? And I don't have an opinion on which one is better than the other. I think it correlates from complexity, but it correlates also from culture. I mean, if you think to your own basement, right, you can throw things in your basement and just forget it. And once every 4 or 5 years, because you will need something at the end of the basement and you cannot get access to that, you will say, okay, I'll invest a week of work and I'll clean it up. This is one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is every time you go into the basement, you really think, where do I put this thing? And you get a basement which keeps in order. Okay, that's the other way of doing things. And sometimes, in some cultures, in not always the place, there is a say it's easier to get the big investment to clean the big mess than to stay on very small steps but keep the whole shop clean. Okay, so that maintenance versus big bang is one of the cultural elements of the adoption of technology. And the last point on this one, it is the role of the crisis manager to be paranoid. Because usually in crisis mode, it's only firefighting. Okay, this thing is down, how I bring it up. The role of the crisis leader is to think, what else could go wrong now? Right? While the teams are trying to fix it, one of the actions is think beyond the horizon. And this is something that requires an ability to project and requires also having this model in the back of your mind on what is the asset you're sitting on, because only then you can start truly anticipating and avoiding that the crisis escalates to an even bigger problem.
Hopefully this was food for thought, and hopefully many of you, those of you who are in the frontiers of neuroergonomics, will be bringing answers, connecting the brains and connecting groups to work in harmony, productively, safely for the future. Thank you so much.
We went through a crisis, 2007, 2009. But the first thing I want to say is that, fortunately, there are crises. The markets have a very long memory. Now, in crisis times, before the crisis, the smart people are those who understand that the situation is not sustainable. The even smarter people are those who understand that and the dynamic of the process with an idea of the time frame. And it is terrible, because smart people, let's say the average smart people, uses history. And those who are able to anticipate a crisis are often those who went through a crisis, either through their academic studies. When it is 1930, not a lot of us were alive by then, or adult by then, or because they went through a crisis such as the dot-com bubble. But they are obsessed by the characteristics of the previous crisis, not by those characteristics of the next crisis. And this is where, again, groupthink might lead to bad investment decisions by smart people. So these are, some of the challenges.
It is a very, very interesting full circle, brain in the loop thing in finance that's going to come. So I'd like to hear your...
Well, you are really, you guys are opening new avenues. Because when we think data, we think economic data, which are low frequency. We think financial data, which are high frequency. And we think all the data gathered by companies such as Google or Amazon. We never think about data coming from the human brain. So this is something I'm afraid nobody has thought in our industry about. So maybe this will come.
I'd like to make a little point, because we discussed this actually electronically. Behavioral data and behavioral finance has almost always focused on the end user, the customers. Do you see a future where this sort of data-driven analytics that comes from decision-making affecting the professionals who are investing?
The concepts that have been developed are becoming more and more useful. Consumers, they are working, they make a life, and then they save money, so they have a risk aversion which is not as straightforward as a simple expectation analysis would suggest. So this is really behavioral finance, which is entirely based on what individuals, consumers. To give you an example, female or male traders behave differently. Their brains are different, but they behave differently in crisis times. So this has been investigated by some teams in some US universities. So it's the very beginning of an analysis of what is the behavior of those who are investing for the small community of traders. I think we would benefit immensely from a better understanding of how the professionals who are doing that for their living, they are investing money on behalf of other people, how they deal with their biases. Do they know their biases? Do they correct for their biases? And if they are not aware of that, but maybe that would be good that they would be aware of that, and how they interact with each other. Now we are able to crunch zillions of terabytes, maybe not zillions yet, but you see what I mean. If we are able to integrate the data coming from the brain, and I'm saying that without a good understanding of what it could be exactly, but I suspect that could make the system much more resilient, much more robust to the fades which lead to bubbles.
Hopefully, thanks to this inaugural event, with our gratitude for the organizers for bringing us together, we will solve all these major challenges that our society has. And this will be, I think, a joining of the forces of an unseen kind. So thank you again, Eric.
I think a lot of work has been done to really make it happen. So thanks a lot to all the people who were involved. Frédéric Dehaye, of course, ISAE and l'Amicale de l'ISAE, and all the other people. As you know, one of the reasons we wanted to do this is because we have this very unique, I think, commitment towards research and scientific research at AXA with the AXA Research Fund, which means for the past 10 years we have been supporting almost every year around 30 researchers across the world on very different topics, always dealing with risks, life risks, environmental risks, socioeconomic risks. And I think beyond the financial aspect of this support, there is also the will at AXA to really be in contact with people who are thinking about the world tomorrow.
The first time they mentioned to me the name of that conference, I must confess that I didn't know what this word meant. But I went to the dictionary to look for the word neuroergonomics, and I didn't find it, and I just love it. Because it means that you guys, your community, is working on questions that have neither been identified so far as questions, or were identified, but no one had decided to tackle them. So it means that your community is really at the forefront of something which is truly new, truly innovative, and that you're bringing something new to that world. And I think this is exactly the purpose of the AXA Research Fund, which is to support those researchers who are working on topics which we believe can make a difference in the society, because we see ourselves as what we call a long-term player. We take commitments for the next 50 years. Therefore, the way the world is going to evolve in the next 50 years is of the utmost importance to us. And our ability to understand how to address risks, how to better define them, how to better measure them, and therefore to build the best response to it is critical. So when I look at what you do, I have a vertigo, because I see that the amount of things that you can find in a brain is just fascinating. This is the infinite I was referring to. And our job at AXA, with my teams and the rest of the CEOs, is to find how we make a link with what is going on in one brain, and how do I make sense of it when there are 160,000 brains. And for us, the challenge is there. What I think and what I say doesn't matter at all. My job is to kill my job. My job, I will have succeeded if one day I can say we don't need a chief transformation officer at all, because actually everyone is a chief transformation officer at AXA, and everyone is taking every day the right decisions.
I would like to dedicate this event to the memory of Raja Parasurman. Thanks to you.